Welcome to the channel. Today's story follows CEO Hung, who quietly builds a home for lytuca, a woman with a child and pregnant with her ex-husband's baby. Despite his father's strong objections, Hung chooses love and protection over judgment. When the house is finished, he brings Tieu and little Han to live with him, waiting together for the new baby to arrive, creating a warm, emotional new beginning. If you love heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's coming next. The land was quiet, almost sacred. Nestled at the edge of a hill where the sun always lingered a little longer before it set, stood the skeleton of a house, not grand, but full of promise. CEO Hung watched silently as workers laid the final stones for the garden path. To them, it was just another project. But to him, it was a dream carved from love, patience, and rebellion. This house wasn't built for business or luxury. It was for her, lytuca, and the little girl who called her me. And for the unborn child growing quietly inside her, without a father to call its own. Hung never told her. He didn't need to. Love, when true, doesn't announce itself. It builds slowly, silently, like this house. Every tile chosen with care, every window placed to catch the morning light she once said made her feel alive. The porch was wide enough for a little girl to dance barefoot. The nursery faced the east, where he hoped their new beginning would rise. But silence can only last so long. One evening, in the cold hallway of his family's estate, his father, Mr. Hoa, found out. "You're building a house," the old man said, voice sharp like breaking glass. "Is that true?" Hung didn't lie. "Yes." "For her?" His father's tone was laced with disbelief. "For that woman?" There was no anger in Hung's eyes, only resolve. "For lytuca. For her daughter. For the baby." Mr. Hoa slammed a stack of papers onto the desk. "She has a child with another man. She's pregnant with his child. Do you understand what you're doing?" "Yes," Hung said simply. "You're throwing away your future, for what? A woman with a past? A broken family? You could have anyone, any woman of class, of status, yet you choose someone the world would turn away from." But Hung didn't flinch. He had already walked through the fire of judgment. She may have a past, but she still walks with her head high. That's more strength than most people I know. His father's voice dropped, now cold and final. "If you go down this road, don't expect my support." "I'm not asking for it," Hung replied. There was a long, bitter silence. "She was left behind by the man who should have protected her," Hung continued. "Her daughter still looks out the window every day, hoping someone will come for her. I'm not that man who left, but I can be the man who stays." His father said nothing more. The echo of his disapproval lingered long after he left the room. That night, Hung drove alone to the construction site. The moon hung low, casting soft silver over the wooden beams. He walked through the half-finished hallway, imagining little footsteps, quiet laughter, a woman humming in the kitchen. Not perfection, but peace. Standing where the front door would be, he looked out over the hill and whispered into the wind. "You don't have to be mine. But I will still build a place where you feel safe. Where your children feel loved. Even if the world doesn't understand." Behind him, the house stood still, waiting. Time passed gently, like the wind brushing across the tall grass outside her apartment window. Lytieuca lived in quiet resilience. Her belly had grown, a tender, visible reminder of a past she never asked for but had chosen to carry with grace. Every morning, she walked little Han to school, holding her tiny hand, answering her curious questions with a tired smile. Every evening, she returned alone, preparing simple meals and reading fairy tales while gently rubbing the child within her womb. She never asked for help. Not from anyone. Not even from the man whose presence had slowly begun to feel like something more than a visitor. Hung never crossed the line. He never pressed, never insisted. But he was always there, like sunlight that slipped through even the thickest curtains. He would knock on her door with warm soup when the weather turned cold. He brought Han new crayons and sat on the floor, drawing stick figures and crooked houses while the child laughed with a joy she had forgotten how to express. Some nights, Tieu found herself waiting. Not for her past, but for his footsteps outside the hallway. She never said it aloud, but she noticed the way his eyes lingered on her, not with pity, but with something gentler, deeper. As if he saw the storm she'd survived and loved the stillness that followed. But she couldn't understand him. Why would a man like Hung, powerful, admired, born into wealth, want a woman like her? "You deserve someone whole," she had once said softly, one night when he stayed a little longer than usual. "I don't want perfect," he answered, eyes never leaving hers. "I want real. I want you." Still, she didn't believe him, not entirely. Not until the afternoon she opened her apartment door and saw what he was holding. A tiny white dress. Hand-stitched. For a newborn baby girl. "I thought, maybe she'd like something soft when she arrives," he said. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But something changed that day. Slowly, she led him closer. They began spending more time together, weekends in the park with Han, quiet breakfasts where he brewed tea exactly the way she liked it. She stopped questioning his presence. Stopped wondering if it was temporary. Because love, when it is true, doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just stays. And all the while, she never knew he was building a home. Not metaphorically, a real home. One with violet flowers by the windows and enough space for both her daughters to grow up unafraid. He watched her belly grow with quiet reverence. Sometimes, when she had fallen asleep on the couch after a long day, he would gently cover her with a blanket, kneel beside her, and whisper to the baby she carried. "You're not mine by blood. But I've already made a place for you in my heart." The sky was soft with golden light as Hung drove slowly up the quiet hill. Beside him, lytuca sat in silence, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. In the back seat, little Han hummed to herself, unaware that today would change everything. As the car rounded the final curve, the house came into view, their house. Tieu gasped. Her eyes widened, filling with disbelief and something deeper, something that felt like hope. The house stood like a quiet promise. A white fence bordered the garden, where violet flowers swayed in the breeze. The porch light glowed softly, waiting. The windows reflected the evening sun, warm and golden. This is for us," she whispered, unable to look away. "For you," Hung said gently. "For Han. For the baby." Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped out of the car. Han ran toward the swing in the yard, laughing like she hadn't in years. Tieu looked up at Hung, emotions too heavy to name. "Why would you do this?" she asked, voice trembling. "For a woman with a past, for children who aren't even yours?" Hung reached for her hand, holding it with quiet strength. "Because love doesn't count the cost," he said. "Because I want to build a life with you, all of you." Inside, the house was warm and full of little details only someone who truly cared could know. Han's room was painted soft yellow, with a bookshelf already filled. The nursery was calm and airy, with a cradle by the window and a rocking chair in the corner. And their bedroom, hers and Hung's, looked out onto the sunrise, just as she loved. That night, for the first time in what felt like forever, Tieu fell asleep without fear. But love doesn't wait for perfect timing. Just 3 days after moving in, pain woke her in the middle of the night. It was time. Hung rushed her to the hospital, his hand never letting go of hers. The contractions came fast and hard. She was scared, not of the pain, but of being alone again. But he never left her side. In the delivery room, as the doctors worked and sweat poured down her brow, she heard his voice through the haze. "Breathe with me. You're not alone. I'm here. I'll always be here." And then, the sound of life. A baby's first cry, piercing and beautiful. Hung stood frozen, tears in his eyes, as they placed the newborn in his arms. The baby was small, warm, perfect. He looked down at the tiny face, then back at Tieu, who was watching him with exhausted joy. "She's ours," he whispered. "No matter what the world says, she's ours." In that moment, the past no longer mattered. Not the judgment. Not the pain. Only this, a man who chose to love completely, and a woman who finally let herself be loved. A new home. A new beginning. A family, whole, at last.